Have you ever wondered if what you learned about the Alamo in school tells the whole story? Most of us grew up with the heroic tale of brave defenders fighting to the death against overwhelming odds. But history, as they say, is written by the winners, and the full picture is almost always more complex than the legends were taught. I'm fascinated by these historical gray areas where mythology and reality intersect, and today we're going to explore one of America's most cherished historical narratives, the Battle of the Alamo. The story, as most Americans know, it sounds like something straight out of Hollywood. 200 freedom-loving Texians making their last stand against thousands of Mexican soldiers, fighting for liberty until the bitter end. But what really happened at that old Spanish mission in San Antonio in 1836? Let's dig deeper into this pivotal moment in American history, looking beyond the myths to understand the complex political, cultural, and personal motivations that drove both sides of this conflict. Before we dive in, I want to be clear. Challenging historical narratives isn't about tearing down heroes or dismissing sacrifice. It's about understanding our shared past in its full context. The defenders of the Alamo did indeed die fighting for what they believed in, that part is true. But the larger context of why they were there and what they were truly fighting for deserves a more nuanced examination. In 1836, Texas wasn't yet part of the United States. It belonged to Mexico. And this is where our story really begins. Most Americans don't realize that the conflict at the Alamo wasn't a straightforward battle for independence or liberty as it's often portrayed. Instead, it was part of a complex struggle involving slavery, immigration policies, political power, and competing visions for the future of the territory. First, let's establish the political context. After Mexico gained independence from Spain in 1821, it initially welcomed American settlers into Texas, offering generous land grants. Stephen F. Austin led this colonization effort, bringing hundreds of American families to settle in the region. However, tensions grew as these Anglo settlers, who soon outnumbered the Mexican Tejano, resisted assimilation into Mexican culture and governance. A critical point that's often overlooked in traditional tellings is the issue of slavery. Mexico had abolished slavery in 1829, but many American settlers, particularly those from southern states, brought enslaved people with them and wanted to maintain the institution. This fundamental disagreement created significant tension with the Mexican government, which saw the abolition of slavery as a moral imperative and sign of their progressive values. By 1835, political instability in Mexico led to the rise of General Antonio López de Santa Anna, who centralized power and suspended the Mexican Constitution of 1824. This move upset Federalists throughout Mexico, including many Tejano who had previously been loyal to Mexico but now found themselves at odds with Santa Anna's centralist government. If you're finding this historical context fascinating and want to join me for more deep dives into misunderstood historical events, now would be a great time to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I explore these kinds of complex historical narratives every week, going beyond the simplified versions we learned in school to understand what really happened and why it matters today. Now, let's look at the Alamo itself. The mission-turned-fortress was originally captured by Texian forces in December 1835 during the early stages of the Texas Revolution. By February 1836, a small force occupied the Alamo, commanded by William B. Travis, with Jim Valley and Davy Crockett among the defenders. These men have been immortalized in American culture, but who were they really? Travis was a 26-year-old lawyer who had abandoned his wife and child in Alabama to seek opportunities in Texas. Bowie was a land speculator and slave trader with a reputation for knife fighting. And Crockett, though indeed a former congressman, had come to Texas after losing his seat in Congress, partly looking to rebuild his fortune and reputation. These were complex individuals with personal ambitions alongside their political convictions, not simply the one-dimensional heroes of legend. The decision to defend the Alamo was itself controversial. Sam Houston, the commander of the Texian forces, had ordered the Alamo abandoned, considering it militarily indefensible. But Travis and Belly chose to stay, perhaps seeing an opportunity for glory or genuinely believing they could hold the position. Either way, it was a military miscalculation that led to their deaths. Santa Anna arrived with his forces on February 23, 1836, and laid siege to the Alamo. The famous line supposedly drawn in the sand by Travis, asking those willing to stay and fight to step across, may be apocryphal, one of many dramatic embellishments added to the story over time. What we do know is that the defenders sent multiple couriers requesting reinforcements, but few came. After a 13-day siege, Santa Anna launched his final assault on March 6th. The battle lasted only about 90 minutes, ending with the death of all or nearly all the defenders. This is where historical accounts get murky. The traditional narrative claims all defenders fought to the death. However, historical evidence suggests some may have surrendered only to be executed afterward. Crockett's death, in particular, has been debated. Some Mexican accounts claim he surrendered and was executed, contrary to the popular image of him fighting until his last breath. The treatment of the dead also differed from the romanticized version. Rather than being respectfully buried, most bodies were burned in pyres, a practical necessity in the warm Texas spring, but hardly the dignified end portrayed in films and textbooks. The aftermath of the battle is where myth-making began in earnest. The Alamo quickly became a rallying cry, "Remember the Alamo," fueling Texian recruitment and morale. 6 weeks later, Sam Houston's forces defeated Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto, effectively securing Texas independence. But here's where the story takes another complex turn. The Republic of Texas existed for nearly a decade before annexation by the United States in 1845, a move that helped precipitate the Mexican-American War. This war resulted in Mexico losing nearly half its territory to the United States. So the events at the Alamo weren't just about Texan independence. They set in motion a chain of events that dramatically reshaped North America. The Alamo story, as commonly told, also largely erases the Tejano who fought alongside the Anglo defenders for a federalist Mexico, not necessarily for an independent Texas. Men like Juan Seguin, who survived the Alamo only because he was sent out as a courier, later found themselves marginalized in the Republic of Texas they helped create, as Anglo settlers increasingly dominated politically and culturally. The indigenous perspective is even more thoroughly erased from traditional tellings. Native Americans in the region, already navigating complex relationships with both Mexican and Anglo settlers, found themselves further displaced as Texas developed first as an independent republic and later as a U.S. state. So, what are we to make of the Alamo today? Was it a noble last stand for liberty or a complex political and cultural conflict with no clear heroes? Perhaps it's both. The defenders did show remarkable courage in facing overwhelming odds. But they were also part of a larger movement that had complicated motivations beyond the simplified notion of fighting for freedom. Understanding this complexity doesn't diminish the bravery of those who died at the Alamo, it humanizes them. They weren't perfect heroes or villains, but people caught in the currents of history, making choices based on their values, interests, and the limited information available to them at the time. As we reflect on what really happened at the Alamo, perhaps the most valuable lesson is how historical narratives are shaped and reshaped to serve present needs. The simple, heroic version of the Alamo story helped forge a unified Texan identity and later served to integrate Texas into American national mythology. But a more complete understanding helps us recognize the diverse perspectives and competing interests that have always been part of our shared history. History isn't a simple morality tale, but a complex web of human decisions, cultural forces, and unintended consequences. By embracing this complexity, we don't tear down our history, we enrich it. If you found this exploration valuable, I'd really appreciate you hitting the like button and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. What other historical events do you think deserve this kind of nuanced examination? Are there other aspects of the Alamo story you'd like to explore further? Your engagement helps this channel grow and allows us to continue bringing these thoughtful historical discussions to more people. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and check the description below for ways you can support the channel. History is always more fascinating when we look beyond the surface, and I'm grateful to have you along for the journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember that understanding our past in all its complexity is essential to navigating our present.